Imagine you're standing in a gallery, right? And you're staring at this small 20 by 30 centimeter painting of a cupcake.
Right, a really intimate, tiny
Yeah,
canvas.
exactly. And there is a cherry resting right on top of a swirl of cream. It looks wet. It looks juicy. I mean, your mouth is actually starting to water just looking at it.
You can practically feel the physical weight of that sweet pastry.
You really can. But then you step a few inches closer and the illusion just completely breaks down. You realize you aren't looking at a cherry or a cupcake at all.
Not even close.
You are looking at a masterclass in biological hacking. You're looking at smeared acrylic paste that has been engineered to perfectly manipulate your retina.
Which is exactly why we assume artists are just human photocopiers, right?
Yeah.
Like matching the color they see directly to the canvas.
Yeah, that's what I always thought.
But true mastery, the kind we find in the absolute highest tiers of classical and contemporary painting, it has absolutely nothing to do with copying reality.
Right.
It is about understanding the physics of light, the chemistry of pigment, and, the psychology of human perception well enough to invent a reality entirely from scratch.
Well, welcome to a very special deep dive. Today, we are stepping into the metaphorical European Art Academy to look directly over the shoulder of a true master painter, Rodolfo Im.
It's an incredible process to witness.
It really is. We are analyzing a piece produced under the banner of Grupo Reim. But to be clear right up front for everyone listening, we are not here to give you a step-by-step painting tutorial
Oh,
today.
definitely not. We are on a mission to reverse engineer the mind of a master.
Exactly. We're going to explore exactly how he thinks, how he traps light on a two-dimensional surface, and how he orchestrates transparent layers to just totally trick the human eye.
It is so essential to approach this not as a sequence of mechanical steps, but as a philosophy of vision.
Philosophy of vision, I like that.
I mean, almost everyone tries to paint or draw something appetizing at some point in their lives,
Yeah.
A piece of fruit, a cup of coffee.
Sure, usually in grade school art class.
Right, and usually the local colors are roughly correct, the shadows are where they belong, but the image is completely dead.
Yeah, that's flat.
Exactly. It lacks that strange, vibrating sensation that makes a painting feel illuminated from the inside out. So we are going to uncover the profound mechanics of why that happens and how a master completely avoids it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To understand that, we have to start before the drawing even exists, before the cupcake is even a sketch on the canvas.
The foundation.
Right. Rodolfo Im completely covers that small space with a highly specific custom mix called Naples Yellow.
It's a gorgeous color.
It is. He creates this by blending titanium white, yellow ochre, a touch of orange, and just a microscopic pinch of raw umber. And he doesn't brush it on, right? He applies it with a sponge.
Yeah, stippling it to make it perfectly smooth.
And the result is completely opaque, uniform, and silky. If you walked into his studio right then, you would literally just see a flat, warm, orange-yellow rectangle.
Which, to the untrained eye, appears as though he's just laying down a background color.
Right, like priming a wall before you paint it blue.
Exactly. But scientifically and optically, the most crucial architectural step of the entire painting has already occurred. Rodolfo Im isn't painting a background. He is physically building a light source.
Wow.
The fundamental error amateur painters make is that they treat paint as physical matter meant to just cover a surface. A master thinks of pigment as a mechanism to control photons.
Okay, wait. I want to make sure I grasp the physics of this. By laying down this specific, highly opaque Naples Yellow, he is basically installing the lighting for the room before he builds the furniture.
That is the exact mechanism, yes. Titanium white is one of the most opaque, highly reflective pigments available to an artist.
Right.
By tinting it into this warm Naples yellow and sponging it on so densely, he creates an impenetrable, highly reflective barrier.
So light can't pass through it.
Right. Every subsequent shadow, every reflection, and every translucent glaze that comes later is going to sit directly on top of this layer.
Ah, I see.
So when light from the gallery hits the finished painting, it will travel through all his future layers of acrylic, hit this solid titanium-based wall, and bounce right back into your eye carrying that warm golden frequency.
Oh, wow. Is this like what happens in cinema when an entire scene is shot during golden hour?
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Because, you have all these completely different objects in the frame, a blue car, a green tree, someone's gray jacket, but because the sun is hitting everything with that low, warm frequency, the entire scene is united.
Exactly. The objects are different, but that underlying lighting harmony connects them completely.
That makes so much sense.
The optical physics are identical here. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying golden light unifies the entire visual field. By establishing this base, the painting is already breathing and emitting light before a single line is drawn.
It's already alive.
Yes, it guarantees that no matter what complex colors arrive later, they will all share a foundational DNA.
Okay, so the Naples Yellow wall dries. The outline of the cupcake is finally sketched. And this is where my intuition completely breaks down.
This is the tricky part.
Yeah, because the master introduces a very humble, earthy color,
Yeah.
oxide red, and he dilutes it heavily with a medium until it's basically colored water.
Yes, highly diluted.
And he applies it in incredibly thin, transparent veils. I think classical painters call them velours.
Velours, exactly. Transparent glazes.
So he maps out the shadows of the cupcake, lets the layer dry, and then paints another transparent layer right over it.
And what we are witnessing here is the birth of anatomical volume. This relies on a profound principle of visual perception.
Which is?
Forms are born from shadows, not from lines in space. He's using this red earth tone because the cupcake is red. He is using it to sculpt weight and gravity.
Wait, so if he wants to paint shadows, why use a red-tinted earth tone? I mean, why not just grab black or gray paint right away to save time? That's what I would do.
And that's exactly why beginners struggle. You are missing the danger of opacity. If you rush in with a flat, opaque black, you instantly kill the light source you just built.
Oh, because it blocks the bounce.
Precisely. You create a dead zone on the canvas where photons go in and just get absorbed entirely. Nothing bounces back. By using highly diluted oxide red in successive layers, letting each one dry completely, he is engaging in subtractive synthesis.
Wait, subtractive synthesis. So every time he adds a layer of paint, he is actually taking light away, like putting on stacked pairs of sunglasses.
That is exactly what is happening physically. Think of the transparent acrylic glazes like sheets of stained glass.
Okay.
If you put a sheet of red stained glass over a bright yellow light bulb, the light still pushes through, but its frequency is altered. Rodolfo Im is gently layering red glass over his luminous yellow wall.
Oh, man. And the original orange background is deliberately left, completely untouched in the brightest areas of the cupcake, right?
That's right. The raw, unpainted background acts as the maximum peak of light. He doesn't paint the highlights. He simply preserves them.
That takes so much restraint.
It does. Slowly, as he stacks these thin veils of oxide red, the cupcake begins to emerge from this visual fog. The shadows get darker and denser through subtractive synthesis, but because there's no black or white mixed into those shadows, they remain completely transparent and luminous.
The patience required for that is staggering.
Yeah.
You are slowly coaxing the three-dimensional shape out of the fog, one transparent veil at a time.
It's building depth without destroying light.
Okay, so we have this heavy, dense 3D shape, but it's completely monochrome. It's basically a reddish earth tone sculpture. How does he start moving from that towards something appetizing without suffocating that underlying light?
By shifting the temperature and the depth of the shadows, once the oxide red anatomy is completely dry, he introduces a new color for the deepest crevices.
Raw umber, right?
Yes, raw umber. It is a much cooler, darker, and more mysterious earth tone than the oxide red. Using the exact same philosophy of highly diluted transparent glazes, he drops this umber into the deepest cavities.
Like the little folds of the cupcake wrapper.
Exactly. The folds, the tightest corners right under the cherry where light really struggles to reach.
So what does this all mean for the viewer? If the oxide red built the general anatomy, what is the raw umber doing to our perception?
It creates visual hierarchy. Without it, the shadows all have the exact same depth. By placing the cooler raw umber in the deepest recesses, those specific areas recede sharply into space.
They turn into little caves of darkness.
Exactly. And because it's glazed over the previous layers, it acts like a musical chord.
Oh, I love that. How so?
In music, a chord is multiple notes played simultaneously, right? They don't cancel each other out. They resonate together to create a complex emotion.
Yeah, harmony.
In painting, the raw umber sits on the oxide red, which sits on the Naples yellow. The light bounces back through all three layers at once, creating a shadow that is optically rich and complex.
The raw umber is like the heavy bass line in a track, giving the whole thing this massive depth, anchoring it down.
That's a great way to put it.
But, you can't have a track with just a bass line. Right after this, the master finally brings in the light, but he completely avoids pure white paint. Instead, he mixes titanium white with yellow ochre to create a warm white.
which demonstrates a very deep understanding of natural phenomena. Nature almost never produces absolute, pure, sterile white light.
Right, because of the atmosphere.
Exactly. Atmospheric light always has a temperature. It interacts with dust and moisture in the air. By tinting the highly opaque titanium white with yellow ochre, he aligns the physical temperature of the light source directly with that initial Naples yellow base we talked about.
And he applies these warm white glazes layer by layer, targeting the illuminated planes of the cupcake. And the visual shift is immediate.
It pops.
It really does. The contrast between that deep, raw umber baseline in the folds and the warm white melody on the peaks suddenly forces the image to just burst outward. The flat canvas is literally tricking our brain into seeing 3D reality.
It introduces one of the grand paradoxes of visual perception. We do not actually perceive light because of the light itself.
Wait, really?
Really, we perceive the intensity of light thanks entirely to the darkness that surrounds it. This is a phenomenon known in color theory as simultaneous contrast.
Ah,
When the master places those opaque, warm white glazes in strict proximity to the deep, transparent umber cavities, your retina processes the sharp difference in value. He is orchestrating extreme contrast to neurologically force your brain into perceiving three-dimensional volume on a flat surface.
okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Sure. We've been talking for quite a while now, and we are still essentially looking at a brownish-orange cake.
True.
The anatomy is flawless, the 3D volume is totally convincing, but the local colors of the actual objects haven't even appeared yet. But when they do, it happens incredibly fast.
It's like magic.
It is. He takes unmixed vermilion, this incredibly vibrant, intense red, and glazes it straight over the cherry and the little candy bars. He washes yellow ochre over the cake sponge and the paper wrapper. He puts a highly diluted topaz glaze over the cream.
And we need to analyze why the color arrives so late in the process. Most beginners try to establish color and volume simultaneously.
Which is why my paintings look like mud.
Exactly. It leads to muddy, confused paintings. Rodolfo Im separates the problems because the volume, the lighting, and the shadows are already perfectly established underneath in monochrome. The color simply acts as a filter.
Wow.
The color doesn't arrive to correct the drawing, it arrives to reveal the material.
So the underlying architecture is doing all the heavy lifting, and the color's just taking all the credit.
Basically, yes.
That completely flips how I thought about the painting process. When he pulls that translucent vermilion over the earthy shadows he built earlier, the cherry doesn't just turn red. The red mixes optically with the dark umber underneath in the shadows, and it mixes with the bright orange in the highlights.
And what's fascinating here is that optical mixing triggers a profound psychological shift. The vermilion glaze suddenly makes the cherry feel wet, tangible, and full of juice.
It really does.
The candy bars, which were just light and dark earth tones a second ago, suddenly feel like processed, sugary sweets.
And the yellow ochre wash over the body of the cupcake physically changes the emotional temperature of the painting. It goes from feeling like a clinical study of light to feeling like something freshly baked and radiating heat.
It appeals to the senses.
It makes you hungry. He's not actually painting a cupcake anymore, is he? He's literally painting the sensation of desire and sweetness. It's like biological hacking through color theory.
He absolutely is. And pay close attention to that topaz glaze on the cream. Topaz introduces a highly complex, slightly cooler, almost invisible nuance to the reflections on the white cream.
It's so subtle.
It proves a foundational rule of art history. True realism is never found in microscopic photographic details. True realism is found in accurate optical relationships. Life in a painting always comes from how colors relate and influence one another, never from a color existing in isolation.
Because if he had just painted the cherry with thick, opaque red paint right at the beginning of the process, it would just look like a flat red sticker placed on the canvas.
Exactly. It would have no life.
It wouldn't have the golden light shining through from behind. It wouldn't have the deep umber pulling it into the shadows. The entire life force of that cherry is dependent on the history of the layers beneath it.
You aren't just seeing a cherry. You are seeing through time. You are perceiving the entire chronological history of the artist's structural decisions simultaneously.
Which brings us to the final two extremes of the painting. First, Payne's Gray. He applies ultra-delicate glazes of Payne's Gray only in the absolute darkest, most extreme depths of the shadows.
The deepest points.
Right. And then he takes pure titanium white, finally, the pure unmixed white, and places these tiny, almost microscopic dots right on the brightest highlights of the cherry and the cream.
Let's dissect the Payne's gray first, because there's an enormous difference between darkening a painting and deepening a painting.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Payne's gray is typically a mixture of ultramarine, blue, black, and sometimes a touch of crimson. It is incredibly cool and deep. A badly placed, heavy shadow will instantly kill a painting, making it look dirty, heavy, or muddy.
Yeah, like a smudge.
But an intelligent shadow, applied as a transparent, cool glaze of Payne's gray over a warm umber, gives the painting a soul. It pushes the physical depth to its absolute maximum limit through temperature contrast, the cool gray receding away from the warm lights.
So the absolute brightest highlight and the absolute darkest shadow are saved for the very end, like the final punctuation marks that make the whole sentence make sense.
Exactly. Up until this final second, everything has been warm, atmospheric, and built through subtractive glazes. But those tiny dots of pure white represent something very specific in optical physics: specular highlights.
Specular highlights.
Yes. A specular highlight is the exact microscopic point where the light source physically bounces off a wet or glossy surface directly into your cornea without being diffused.
Oh, wow.
It is the visual climax where light finally touches dense matter. By saving the pure, opaque white strictly for those tiny dots, he makes the cherry pop with moisture and the cream glisten. If he had used pure white anywhere else in the painting, this wet illusion would fail entirely.
It's just staggering. When you step back and look at the finished piece, the entire sequence locks into place. You completely forget that you are looking at acrylic polymer and pigment smeared on a piece of fabric.
Because the artist has successfully guided your perception through a carefully engineered sequence of physics and psychology. He built the invisible luminous wall of Naples Yellow, sculpted the anatomy with the Oxide red, pushed the spatial hierarchy with the raw umber.
Illuminated the forms with the warm white.
Yes, revealed the physical materials with the vermilion and topaz, and finally punctuated the reality with the titanium white.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the overarching lesson here is completely transformative. The art produced by Grupo Reim and masters like Rodolfo Im teaches us that painting at this level isn't about reproducing the world around us.
No, it's about inventing it.
Exactly. It is about transforming raw chemistry into emotion, atmosphere, and light. He creates a visual experience so utterly convincing that your brain simply bypasses its logical defenses and accepts the illusion as a physical truth.
He is not painting objects. He is painting the physical behavior of light and the psychology of human desire.
And for everyone listening, the next time you find yourself wandering through a museum or an art gallery standing in front of a masterpiece, I want you to fundamentally change how you engage with it.
Look closer.
Don't just look at the surface details or the subject matter. Try to look through the layers. Try to spot that invisible wall of light the artist built beneath it all. Look for the subtractive shadows holding the architecture together, and the tiny specular highlights that trick your retina into seeing moisture.
And this raises an important question, something for you to think about long after we finish speaking today.
What's that?
If a master painter can invent such a compelling, undeniably real physical presence by simply orchestrating transparent layers of light and shadow to hack the human eye, how much of our everyday visual world, the reality we think we see so clearly and objectively, is just our brain being similarly manipulated by contrast, context, and the angle of the light?
It certainly makes you wonder. Perhaps that simple objective reality we expect to see everywhere is actually just an incredibly well-executed illusion waiting for us to finally look close enough to notice the brushstrokes.